We should never allow the government to decide what is acceptable speech and what is unacceptable speech. We should penalize behaviors, not opinions, and not speech. If you start trying to regulate speech, you start trying to regulate thoughts, you start trying to regulate beliefs rather than behaviors, there's no way that you're not going to abridge the constitutional rights of millions of Americans.
The following program was kaleidoscoped by CBS News at the WCBS television studios in New York City. The following is a special CBS News report. We now join our CBS correspondent in New York. Here is Monica Johnson.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Monica Johnson for CBS News, and tonight we have a unique opportunity to speak with the host who just did a special on the most significant story that has mesmerized millions of viewers for the past 50 years. The news special, Alvin's Last Days at San Quentin State Prison, has obtained the highest rating in the history of the Nielsen ratings system for the most viewers, racking up an impressive 500 million viewers. As we have been reporting on most affiliate stations this past week since its airing, the response we have received has overwhelmed most executives at CBS of how little people remember about this story since the first time we reported it in 1965 on a cold Christmas morning in Hollywood. With us tonight is David Carter, whose father first reported this story in the days following the attempted murder of Dave Seville by Alvin the Chipmunk in the sound studios of Liberty Records, now Capitol Records. All reports have shown that in the days following, no one knew if Dave would survive the point-blank shots that were fired from Alvin's .22 caliber pistol. Yet, doctors were hopeful that Dave's condition wasn't as fatal as was first thought. Indeed, he not only survived the shooting but had a successful career afterwards and progressed to a full recovery. He died, sadly, in 1972 at the same time that Alvin was found dead in his cell at San Quentin. No one knows why the Justice Department or the media were so secretive about the murder or those who were involved in the shooting. But, we now have all the facts about what happened thanks to a secret memo that was released by an unknown source who leaked it to CBS News sometime in 1981. This is when David Carter found it by perchance on his desk and thus began his quest to learn all the facts about what did in fact happen to Alvin, the chipmunk. Let me begin by saying that every child in this nation was heartbroken after learning of the tragedy, but only as a past event in history that even their own parents still have no recollection of to this day. Viewers have been emailing us at CBS since the story broadcast last week, and even the social media outlets are responding with uncounted millions who are shocked that they didn't know this had ever happened in the Hollywood stars arena. The known facts that have just been learned from the state prison personnel who told CBS in confidence that we were the only network who would be given these facts is surprising to all other networks. We feel it is our responsibility as the first and only network who has attempted to bring all the facts to the general public since it happened of what really did take place in the months and years since the event took place. Only NBC itself tried once to release a recreation of the story in a TV movie, but it failed to give all relevant facts of the tragedy because only CBS archives have done the most extensive research into what happened. Let me ask you, David, what was your feelings when you went to San Quentin? Did you feel overwhelmed by how the prisoners are treated at the prison, or was it as you expected it to be?
Monica, let me just say first off that you must realize this prison is where people spend their entire lives. So I don't think a woman could probably cope with it because even though they're supposed to maintain it, you would know from just smelling the place that it's definitely for men only. But really, to answer your question honestly, I felt a solemnness about this place that this is where people who have committed crimes are placed to live out the rest of their lives. It is not a morale-based prison. You're there. That's it. You're not given parades. You're not given any special accommodations. They don't have TV in their cells. What I saw mostly was just Bibles. People had books to read. But as far as it's just like what you see in the movies about Alcatraz. They found ways to keep themselves occupied, and that's how Alvin lived himself. He had it a lot harder, I think, because of his size, but he still had enough anger built up after how he was treated during the trial, and just that anger he felt inside, it just overflowed his emotions. And a lot of times people I've spoken with, the prisoners said he just couldn't deal with it, and that's why the guards and the medical personnel in the prison had to sedate him all the time, because they told me in confidence that once or twice in those 3 years he was in the state penitentiary that he was found having attempted suicide at least twice, and so that's why they also had to put him in a straitjacket to keep himself from grabbing anything that might hurt himself with it. I mean, you know that even though they're not allowed to have any kinds of cutlery in their cells, sometimes they can steal things when they're in the commissary eating. And, you know, if you're smart enough, you could rig something together and make it a weapon. But that's what I felt, Monica, really. The whole time I was there, I felt like this is where people who are guilty of crimes should be. I don't feel pity, though, for Alvin or Alfonso Gorkin, because I feel like he did something wrong and he knew he did, and he tried everything he could towards the end of it to weasel his way out of it by saying, well, look, you know, you got the wrong man. I'm not the one that you think I am. And it's just it's hard to explain, really, his emotions, except that he was obviously lashing out at people, and he felt such hatred that only through medication were they able to even control his emotions enough sometimes that he could be placed back into a normal cell with other prisoners. Other than that, he was always in the isolation ward most times.
I was told by the producers that this is one interview you made back in the 1980s with a prisoner who was talking by phone through a glass plate window. What's that about?
This prisoner interview you're going to see in just a few moments was done while I was in prison, and I did not have the opportunity to air it in the special because we are on time constraints as far as what we're allowed to air before all the commercial breaks, and it just was running too long, and that's why we never showed it. But this is one of several prisoners who I spoke with behind glass. He was using a telephone. Most times I could go out in the general population of the prisoners and speak to them, but in this instance, this particular interview was aired on another CBS special back in the 80s, and we thought it was relevant, so I wanted to include it on this this post-production interview or overview that we've done of the special that was just completed. And you'll hear him speak about Alvin, and he was in isolation at the time, and this individual had the chance to speak to Alvin, which no other prisoner even would admit that he spoke to them at all. Even Charles Manson, if you saw in the special, he stated categorically the only thing he could say or sum up who Alvin was as an individual, he said he was baffling. That means there is no words to describe who Alvin was and how he reacted to others around him. That's how deranged he was. And you know how crazy Charles Manson was too. But yet if he could say Alvin's personality was baffling for him to interpret, that tells you there was no way anybody really understood who he was. But this is the interview that I did not include, and of course not only because of time constraints that most everybody knew this already. and it had to do with Alvin having escaped out of the state prison about a year before he actually was found dead. And we still to this day don't know how he got out, who helped him, and that's what the prisoner basically said to me.
Alvin was dangerous to me. He made a lot of threats to people in the hole, and when I was forced to be in the same isolation ward with him, I never wanted to be near him. He told me one day he was going to break out of this pen, and if I wanted to go with him, I should tell everyone else who would want to. I told him, "Whatever you want, I don't want anything to do with it." He said, "If you want to go with me, you'd better tell me, and soon." I told him, "You're crazy. There's no way anyone can get out of this place." He left, then said he knew people in the prison and out of the prison who already had set it up for him. I couldn't say anything. I was flabbergasted. A few days after we were released from solitary, he disappeared. The guards threatened everyone. How did he get out? They kept yelling at us. I told them. He said he would, and he did. I couldn't explain it. Then we heard they found him like 4 weeks afterwards at a radio station in Hollywood. KCHP, 660 AM. That radio DJ, Herman the Chipmunk, was live, and we heard Alvin walk in and start yelling at him. Then he said on air that he wasn't Alvin, he was some guy named Alfonso Gorkin. The whole prison chanted to him, "Go, go, go." Then we were hosed down with water from the guards. That's what they do when you say something they don't like.
Monday at 8, a mysterious accident leads Leslie Nielsen to the resurrection of Zachary Wheeler.
My God, that Senator Wheeler.
Maintain clinical life at all costs. The entire incident is void. It did not take place.
No such person arrived.
The hell he didn't. Senator Wheeler, are you in there? My God.
Leslie Nielsen witnesses the resurrection of Zachary Wheeler, Monday at 8 on TV 29.
This house has a clogged drain. Let's check out the problem.
I'm Grease. Me and my buddies, Hair, Tree Roots, and Chicken Bone, got this drain blocked.
I am Amazing Anthony, the drain cleaning machine used by Anthony, the family plumber.
Hey, Anthony, bet you can't get us.
Watch this. Electric drain and sewer cleaning, fastest service, no excuses. Anthony is so amazing, we'll unclog most any drain.
Anthony's drain cleaning machine, amazing.
I can't go on. Not even a dog should have to live on one meal a day.
Life is Treat them right. Give them Tasty Chunks. Healthy snacks for dogs on one meal a day.
I'm tired of begging.
Tasty Chunks. Snacks for dogs from Gaines.
Welcome back, everyone. I'm Monica Johnson, and this is a special follow-up show to the highly successful special that CBS aired last week about the infamous chipmunk, Alvin, and the last days he spent at San Quentin State Prison. As you already know, Alvin was found dead of a cut throat and several stab wounds to his chest in 1972 at the state prison where he was being incarcerated for the attempted murder of Dave Seville on that Christmas morning in 1965 at Emmy Studios in Hollywood. Because of suppression from the Department of Justice in the years after it happened, we know very little now about the real facts surrounding this event in history. Through several previous specials, CBS television has attempted to piece together the events surrounding this tragic story that affected every child in the United States. We have learned that the story spread throughout Europe in the decades following, and even into Canada, where many fan clubs were created to study the events and try doing we have been doing since 1981, when the first evidence came to light that the real Alvin had been kidnapped by a group of men working for the underground world of organized crime. The rest is, as they say, history. Tonight on this special follow-up, we have in our studios the man whose father began the story in 1965 as it unfolded on radio and television across the nation. David Carter is here with us to explain further facts that weren't shown in the original special. According to the Nielsen ratings of that night, more than 500 million people watched the show, which was also seen around the world in every country on Earth. Because it is still unclear of what this means to the future of the franchise and the millions of records and CDs that have been released, it could be the most significant news event in the Hollywood entertainment business to date. I'm going to return now to asking David a few other questions about Alvin and hope we can perhaps answer some questions that have been coming in from Facebook and Twitter tonight. A most fascinating thing has been identified by David, having been found at the San Quentin State Prison while he was doing various interviews there for the special. The warden of the prison, Ronald Davis, shared many facts that the government and the media suppressed after the events took place in Hollywood. One is that many interviews we've done on Alvin over the years were only a small section of what the prison made of Alvin during the time he was in solitary confinement. The warden said these recordings are mostly of Alvin screaming at guards and other prisoners. They did these as proof to the Pardons and Parole Board that Alvin should never again be released into the general public for fear of what he might do again, kill. I don't really know what this recording is, but hopefully we can find out more details from David Carter. David, thanks for staying with us tonight on this rare follow-up show to your special. What is the recording you said was found but not aired on the special last week?
Monica, as you may or may not know, we pretty much recorded every single time we could whenever Alvin was either in the sentencing phase of the trial, when he was recaptured after the escape from San Quentin. We got all of the audio evidence we could, but we did go back to the warden of the state pen right now. His name is Ron Davis, and he first gave me the photograph we used at the end of the special of the last photograph ever made of Alvin after the event of him having been stabbed multiple times and that he had a cut throat. We showed that in the special. And it's actually gruesome if you look at it because it's in color. We felt at first we were going to show it only in black and white, but the producers felt like if you're going to make this a sensational, big-time special, and we're going to talk about every single facet of what happened to Alvin, we have to show it in its original color photograph. So that's one reason we decided to do it like that, because we felt it was important. But Alvin... what he said sometimes in the state pen, there were instances where maybe one of the guards could have been using a video camera to do documentation of how the prisoners were interacting, maybe as evidence to the parole and pardons board about whether to let a particular prisoner out on bond, or it was just evidential information only. And they did declassify some things that the Department of Justice felt like was just it was unimportant subjects. But then they also, they suppressed it all during the time that the media was trying to get facts about what had happened to Alvin after they found him dead. And this audio piece here you're going to hear is just one of those non-evidential recordings that Alvin was heard to say to the prisoners. I believe this is one instance where he was being taken to isolation, and he just kind of lashed out at people. And they felt like this is proof positive he should never get out again. I think that's one reason they recorded it, was just to say this is who he is, and this is what he'll do if he gets out. And people would love to hear Alvin again, this impersonator, this imposter, but really it's not the real Alvin. We know now Alvin, the real Alvin himself, is still alive. He's still doing all these different films you see in theaters, on television. He was doing it back in the 80s and the 70s. Everybody's going to be a little baffled or confused. Who are we talking about? Are we going to talk about the voice actor who did his voice? No, because we're talking about the actual person who is Alvin. You can't obviously show who he really looks like, even though we have now shown you his real photograph, because he's dead, so it doesn't matter. He has no identity. But the person that is behind the voice, who is actually the one doing the actual animation, is a real living creature. He's an individual, and that's why you will never really know who he is to this day, because they want to protect his privacy. And that's why we want it clearly understood by the audience that Alvin is a real person. He is not an animated character. He is not a voiceover. Alvin is a real living chipmunk who lives today in Hollywood, but we won't say where. And he and Simon and Theodore are still very much alive doing the work they do. We don't know how long they'll be doing it, because if they die, then that's the magic of television and animation. They'll just find somebody else to take their place. But it will never be the originals again. And that's what Alvin told me when I met him in the years after, that who he is, he's happy to be, and what happened about this imposter who took his place was not only a travesty and a tragedy for him, but people up to this day have never known all the facts, and you're probably never going to know all the facts, because the Department of Justice still plays this plausible deniability on us. We don't get them to say flat out that he did exist or he lived at the time that these things were happening in two different places. They won't identify that he was actually impersonated or there was an imposter. They leave it all kind of like, gun and dagger type stuff. You just don't know what's really the true facts, because for them it would be an embarrassment for the FBI to say, oh yeah, we did actually get him out. So it's sort of like the official answer is plausible deniability, but from sources we have within the FBI and within the Department of Justice itself, we've verified and confirmed these facts. And that's what really everybody wants to know, not what the government itself is trying to continually lie about. And you see that. The Democrats are still doing that to this day, lying about every little thing that President Trump tries to do. And that's why we call it plausible deniability, because you can't get them to really be truthful and honest enough to tell you the facts, because they're never going to. True is about John F. Kennedy's assassination. They're never going to tell us about that either. But anyway, here is the audio, and it'll just it'll make you wonder.
Hey, you human pig, get your hands off of me. I'm telling you for the last time, I am not Alvin. Hey, stop it. Get your hands off of me. You... Hey, stop it. Get your hands off of me.
Get in here, Alvin. Don't make me spray you with rodent killer again.
My goodness, he said those kinds of words and we had bleeped out? This person had serious psychological problems, no doubt. Let me ask you about this organized crime connection, David. How did you learn about all this? I know you have said that a memo was found amongst your desk papers that was from the Department of Justice around 1981. Tell me more about that if you can.
This whole show, this whole subject, has been going on for 50 years. It's been my life, because my father had so much to do with this story. And then as I grew up, I wanted to get into the same type of career as he had, in journalism. And it was always been my hope that I could find some closure to what was this story really about. Who was this Alfonso Gorkin? Who was it that slurred and black-marked Alvin as a character, as an individual? And then you start prying into more facts, and other things come out, even more grisly than you've even seen in his death shot. That picture of him. Even now, it just makes me grimace that he suffered as much as he did at the hands of those same prisoners he actually lived with, and that he could not deal with it day to day. He was so scared that he knew his days are numbered, Organized crime, we've seen all kinds of things about the Costa Nostra, the mafia itself, because that's all a part of organized crime. You can see how conspirators aren't totally off kilter when they say that John F. Kennedy was assassinated by the Central Intelligence Agency as well as the mafia, the organized crime. They still to this day, Monica, they don't know what happened to Jimmy Hoffa. He was the actual leader of the Teamsters at the time that John F. Kennedy and Robert Kennedy were in the White House. And they said categorically, we're going to find who you have as your links and your contacts, and we're going to take you out. I mean, that's what John F. Kennedy said to Jimmy Hoffa at one of those conference hearings. He was complaining about this bill that they were trying to pass that would cut the idea of unions controlling so much of how our business works in capitalism. And Kennedy said to Hoffa, this is a union-busting bill. At least Hoffa said that to Kennedy. And he says, Mr. Hoffa, the fact that you come here and take the Fifth Amendment and all the rest of it, it's like he and Hoffa hated each other, And then you find out after Hoffa disappeared, they never found his remains. They never found anything about this guy. That's how much he intimidated the organized crime groups who actually were supporting his work in the Teamsters. And then you think, boy, you flip that to an individual like Alvin, and the fact that they murdered him in prison. Kind of like saying to the rest of the prisoners, you're going to end up the same way if you start running your mouth. And that is true what happened of those other prisoners who were involved in the death of Alvin. They never prosecuted any of them. You know why, Monica? Because they were found dead themselves. But because of litigation over who they were and their identities, the networks have never disclosed any of that. And that's actually because also the Department of Justice put a gag order on the rest of them. These are the people I've been talking about over the past years that they had ties not only to organized crime, but these people actually worked for this organization, Peter Pan Industries, who owns a lot of these other recording artists who had ties and indirect ties into that chipmunk music market. That this is how it all started. They wanted to wipe out the conglomerate, in this case Capitol and EMI and Liberty Music. They figured if we take out these guys, then it opens that door for the rest of the markets that are out there kind of grabbing at whatever money they can make, because they knew that Alvin, the Chipmunks, Dave Seville, they held the monopoly on chipmunk music because they started it. And that's why you have this whole coup developing where they wanted to wipe out all individuals who had anything to do with this music industry. And, the first person to be wiped out was the imposter himself. They put him in there, but they didn't support him. And they told him, you failed, you're gone, that's the end of it. And he was. 3 years into the time that he went into prison, they found him dead. And subsequently, all the rest of the people who were involved in the killing of Alvin, the imposter himself, Alfonso Gorkin, they were dead too. And then you look into the organization of Peter Pan Industries, and all the individuals involved in that were also wiped out. I would love to tell you names, Monica, of who these people are, but the Department of Justice still says there are gag orders. You can't talk about who these people's names really are. We're even pushing it to say that it's Peter Pan Industries because they didn't really want to indict or bring out the fact that it was these organizations or these companies who had any involvement in it. So it's a very big whitewash by the FBI, by the Department of Justice. They don't want people knowing who it is what happened or anything else. They want to keep it as totally in the dark. Even now, 50 years later, they still don't want people knowing what happened.
I think what we've learned tonight proves to every freedom-loving American that we are now under a socialist regime which Barack Hussein Obama began in 2008 and continues to this day. We must not give in to the socialist Democrats' views that we are what they intend to make us believe. Freedom has never been a free gift, it was fought for. What Alvin's legacy has shown us through this follow-up special is that we are now at a crossroads in America's future civil rights. This is no longer about a race war, this is about our very rights to be human and be free. The more socialism lies to us, the faster we are enslaved to what Obama kept saying all those years. You didn't do that, someone else made that happen. You can't do anything without the government. Boy is he wrong, we are our own leaders. We don't need a black president to show us we are who we want to be, not a government telling us what or who we will be. I'm Monica Johnson, on behalf of CBS News. We thank you all for watching tonight and thank you David for coming here to show us the truth of what happened at San Quentin in 1972. We need more people who are willing to stand up for their rights as you have shown us we must be. If only Americans would strong now, instead of drug addicts. Good night and may God bless America again through President Donald Trump and his Making America Great Again tool.
This program and teleplay are copyright by CBS News Incorporated, uniquely qualified to bring you the world. To order a transcript of this program, write to Transcripts, 110 51st Street, New York, New York 10012. Order a DVD of this program, visit www.news.com web link stories and search for Alvin the Chipmunk's Last Days at San Quentin. Or to order by phone, call 1-800-CBS-NEWS.
بيحب الوصلة بيحب الوصلة لا لا
His name is Omran Daknesh, just 5 years old, and his feet barely hung over the edge of a seat in an ambulance. Dazed, he didn't cry as he wiped away blood and the dust from a building that collapsed around him in an airstrike. His silence somehow reminded the world today of its silence in the face of the atrocities in Aleppo. Omran was pulled out alive Wednesday. 5 other children died when the building they were in was hit during the relentless Syrian-Russian offensive on rebel-held areas in Aleppo. The image of Omran's face spread like wildfire on the internet. One tweet called him the real representative of the Syrian people.
Stop killing Syrian innocent people, civilian. Our children need to live in peace.
The doctor who treated Omran said today there were many more severe cases no one is paying attention to.
We need to protect our hospital, our doctors, our medical workers from airstrike.
Omran is recovering. His family now wants to escape. The same choice another boy's family made a year ago, Aylan Kurdi, whose body washed up on a beach. He too was a symbol of Syria's youngest victims. Now there's a new one. Tomorrow there may be another. Richard Engel, NBC News.
They've reported from around the world, challenged the powerful, and they bring all of this to every story that breaks.
We've got breaking news, and it's good news.
And touches your heart.
How do you even say thank you? Thank you is not big enough.